You guys are definitely getting in at the perfect time.
This investment opportunity will not last long. I shouldn't say this, but I can guarantee
That your money will double.
and there's absolutely no risk to you.
So, how's 20 grand to start?
Most fraudsters aren't this easy to spot. Find out if you're dealing with a registered investment professional with a free simple search at investor.gov. Before you invest, investor.gov.
We have a guest today from the state of Vermont, William Carrigan, who's the Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Financial Regulation. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you,
Good to
Elliott.
see you. You know, we've done a number of different programs with different officials and personalities locally, and I know you're a bit of a personality, so we can take that for what it means. You're in the Department of Financial Regulation, and I think it's safe to say that very few Vermonters actually know what that department is. Now, they may be familiar with banking and insurance or some other incarnation, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about what DFR actually involves.
Sure. Initially, the department was called BISCA, and it was an acronym: Banking, Insurance, Securities, and Healthcare Administration. A number of years ago, the Healthcare Administration was kind of moved out, and it more or less morphed into the Green Mountain Care Board. So the entities that were left, which is banking, insurance, securities, and captive insurance, we're all responsible for the regulation and oversight of financial entities. So hence the new name, Department of Financial Regulation. You bring up a good point in that there are many folks in the state that aren't familiar with us, and that's very true. I, on a regular basis, do retirement seminars for the Treasurer's Office for state employees. And there's a number of state employees who don't know who we are, and that's part of our problem. Because if folks don't know we're there, they don't know how we can help them. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today to kind of spread the message, let folks know who we are and what we do and how we can help them.
Now, there are 3 actual divisions to the department?
Actually, there's 4, but there's only 3 that most people are familiar with. So the department is made up of the banking division, the insurance division, the securities division, which is the division that I'm with, and then we have a division called captive insurance. And captive insurance is kind of a separate entity, and most folks aren't familiar with that because it really isn't a public-facing division. It's one that deals more with entities and corporations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who are you? Who's Bill Carrigan?
All right. Well, I'm almost hesitant to admit this, but I'm a New Jersey native.
Oh, no.
Yeah, transplanted up here. My wife and I made the move to Vermont with our 2 young children, the proverbial quality of life move in August of 1995. I've been with the division for 12 years. I started out as an examiner with the division and then was promoted up to the director of enforcement. And 2 years ago, when Mike Pichek was appointed by Governor Shumlin at the time to be the commissioner of the Department of Financial Regulation, I was tabbed as the deputy then for the securities division. My background is I've been in the investment industry since 1993, so I actually come to the position with experience in the industry, which has been very helpful for not only the division, but for those that we regulate. So that's kind of who we are. So now you have it on video forever that I'm originally from New Jersey and a Yankee fan. So.
Well, that makes 2 of us. So
oh, there we go.
We can commiserate at times.
Right. Sounds good.
Securities division, your area.
Yes.
What do you guys do?
Okay, good question. We touch on a lot of different aspects of securities. Some folks think security. They ask me oftentimes, "Well, are you in charge of security guards?" And that's not the kind of security that we do. We are responsible for the regulation and oversight of those folks that are providing investment advice in Vermont. So it's broker-dealer firms, broker-dealer agents, investment advisors, and investment advisor representatives. And we have, this is actually very surprising to folks. We only have 625,000 people roughly in the state. And we have over 107,000 registered broker-dealer agents here. So essentially one broker-dealer agent for every 6 people, roughly. And they're not all domiciled here, but if they want to conduct business with Vermont residents, they need to be properly registered in the state. We have a high number.
So conduct business means?
Essentially, if they wanted to help you, for example, with your portfolio, and they want to help you buy and sell securities, they need to be properly registered here in the state, as does the firm that they're with. So they need to register with us. So we have a registration individual who handles all those registrations. We are also then responsible for the examination of the firms that are with us. So we regulate them, we provide oversight. In those instances where we have customers who are unhappy or maybe feel they've been taken advantage of, we have a complaint program, so they can file a complaint with the division. We'll look into that and see if we have any violations of the Vermont Uniform Securities Act. And if we do, we then look to an enforcement action. We investigate, and then we have the ability to take an enforcement action against either the individual and or the firm, with our primary focus on making sure that the investors get restitution if they've been harmed.
So there's a layer of protection when I, as an investor, go out in the marketplace to purchase something that will hopefully help me out in my retirement.
Yes, yeah, there are, and it's going to vary depending upon the product that you're looking to become involved with, and that's one of the things that we stress to Vermonters, and that's why they need to know that we're there, because we can help them with a lot of information before they ever become involved with an individual or a particular investment.
Do you find that you're getting a lot of people taking advantage of that, or is it more after the fact?
It's a little bit of both, but for example, we'll see a spike after we do one of our events, for example, with AARP, where we have a lot of people there. And we stress the fact that folks should, we term it investigate before you invest. Find out about who you're doing business with and also the products that they're offering you. We do notice a spike at that point right after for the next week or two with people calling to ask us about the folks that they're doing business with and look into their background.
Are there any particular scams or fraud that you see happening more to Vermonters than other types?
I would say that there are a few, and the interesting thing is that the scams, they'll change based on economic conditions. We essentially call it the fraud du jour. It's whatever's popular right now. And so where we're seeing areas of concern for us, and it's a little bit different than what it's been in the past, and you may be familiar with this, but over the last year or so, you've heard the term Bitcoin and cryptocurrency a lot more. Mm-hmm. So we are getting people who are being targeted. So that's one that we see. Another one that we still see a lot is what we call the grandparent scam. Where people are kind of being contacted, and there's a scenario put forth that's everything is fraudulent. We also have to understand, I like to preface this with the majority of these types of scams, there is no real revenue generating type entity in any of these. It's all a fraud. The other one that we see still a lot are Ponzi schemes. The biggest case we had in Vermont as it relates to investment fraud, it was a Ponzi scheme, and that was the biggest one we had until it was no longer the biggest one we had because another one came in that was bigger. The one I'm referring to, which some of your folks may be familiar with, was a gentleman by the name of Mac Parker who was making a movie called Birth of Innocence. Ironic being you had 2 people who spent time in federal prison. But that was a Ponzi scheme, and that was a case where had somebody reached out to us over the course of 10 years when that was running to check on the background of Mr. Parker and also check on the promissory notes to see if they were properly registered, chances are we may have been able to do something about that sooner than we were. The problem that we have is we only hear from 1 out of every 5 people that becomes a victim of investment fraud. And most of the time, quite frankly, as I'm sure you're well aware, they're embarrassed. They don't know, they do not want to admit that they've been victimized. So they don't contact us. And it's hard for us to do something about those incidents that we don't know about. That's why it's important. We're good, but we're not that good. So if people reach out and let us know about some of these things, we have a better opportunity to potentially, help them get restitution on their investment, and then maybe even more importantly, stop the scam so that future folks don't become victimized as well. Because a lot of times with some of these scams, once the money's gone, it's gone. You know, because not all of them emanate from here, and if they're emanating from Eastern Europe or somewhere outside the U.S., it's very hard for us to have any sort of traction to get restitution.
Now, you said Mr. Parker's situation went over a period of 10 years.
Yes.
How did he manage to keep this thing going? I mean, was he targeting particular people? Is there something that we should get as a lesson to the public in general when they're approached for an investment? Because I'm guessing he must have gone almost door to door to do this.
Essentially, yeah. There were hundreds of investors, and not just in Vermont, but they were in a number of other states. A lot of it is based on trust. I don't know how familiar you are with Mr. Parker, but he had made a children's video that was pretty popular called Let's Go to the Farm. He was a storyteller in Vermont, so people knew him. He would do stories in schools. He would do first nights around the state and things like that. So people knew them or knew him. And then there was that trust factor, you know. And the rates of return that he was offering was very high. Initially, it was 12 to 15%, and then it went up from there. And so, yeah, we can also kind of bring in the old adage: if it sounds too good to be true, it is. I mean, if you look back during the periods of time that those investment returns were being offered, that wasn't real. You know, you couldn't get that anywhere else.
So this wasn't during a period like the 80s where, you know,
no,
investments were getting 10, 12%.
No, it was significantly higher than what you could expect in the actual market. But again, you know, there's 2 primary motivating factors with folks when it comes to money. And there's only 2. And it's fear. You don't want to lose what you have. And it's greed. You always want more, you know. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you remember the initial Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas, he had a great line. Bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. Okay? So bulls, you know, bull market is an up market. As the market's going up, people just kind of, they're along for the ride. And a lot of people, and I don't know if this may be of interest to you or some of your folks, but they oftentimes ask, well, how do they come up with that name? What is a bull market? Well, a bull has horns, and it attacks by going up. So that's an up market. A bear market is when the market's going down. And how does a bear attack? Well, it claws down. So hence the term bear market when things are going down. And then the pigs, I think you get that. You know, you're just kind of hanging on for that last bit instead of, you know, having a plan and knowing when you should be getting out. So this was a case where, you know, people got used to above average market returns and wanted to keep that going. You know, so.
And it probably went by word of mouth from one person to the next, saying this looks like a
Yes.
great deal. You better jump in before you become a loser on this.
Right. And not in this particular case, but Ponzi schemes in general, what you'll hear from the individual that's perpetuating the fraud is, you know, they'll in some cases we use what's called affinity fraud. So they'll find a group of folks, a like-minded group of folks, and it could be a church group, it could be a social group or whatever, and they'll infiltrate that group, find the individual that is kind of the center of influence, somebody who everybody else looks up to, their opinion matters, they seem to be, you know, pretty solid, and they'll befriend them. and they will go ahead and become friendly with them, and they'll try to gain their trust. That's the biggest thing, before they ever talk to them about the investment opportunity. And then once they do talk to them about the investment, it's always with the caveat that you can't tell everybody else because we can't do this for everybody. So it's kind of unique, and they'll get involved usually on a small basis and get the return that they're supposed to be getting. And then after a while, the scammer will say, well, you can tell a couple other people if you know somebody else that might be interested, and it's kind of like that. And there was a commercial on TV a number of years ago, and it was for shampoo, and I forget what the name of the shampoo was, but it showed a woman using it, and then it says, and she told 2 friends, and she told 2 friends, and pretty soon the whole screen is covered with people. And a lot of these Ponzi schemes work the same way. It's a word of mouth. Nobody really checks on the individual or the investment that they're being offered, and that's where the problem is. Yeah.
And we've seen, some low-level schemes that have happened, but we also see some very high-level ones that have made the news around the EB5 program, and not so much down in this end of the state, but certainly up in the Northeast Kingdom, there's been a bit of activity, and maybe you can talk about what you can about.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk, a little bit kind of high level about that, because there is still some ongoing litigation there. The EB5 program is a program that was set up, by the federal government to allow foreign investment and to give folks, some benefit for that. And the way the program works, kind of on a high level, without getting into the weeds, is that these projects, in this case, you mentioned Jay Peak, so there were 8 individual projects that were being offered by the sponsors, and it's Ariel Kuros and Bill Stenger were involved. So they offered investment into these programs. So if you were a foreign investor looking to invest in the U.S., you could invest $500,000, plus there was an administrative fee. And again, without going too deep into the weeds, if your investment, if you were able to track it and show that when the project was completed or reached a certain point, that your investment either helped to create 10 new jobs or to save 10 jobs, you would get a green card for you and your immediate family. So there was definitely a real kind of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here for folks that wanted to do that. And it was a way to entice capital raising for folks that wanted to develop these projects. That's a little different than your normal bank type financing. Like any other sort of investment, when you have these sort of opportunities, they oftentimes lend themselves to fraudulent activity. And there was a lot of money that went to things that it should not have gone to. The division or the department was brought into this, a few years ago, and our involvement was to look at the financial aspect after there were some issues raised, and we did that, and it was a pretty involved process, and I think kind of everybody knows where we are today. It mushroomed into something much bigger where the SEC was involved, and so that was one that everybody is familiar with. Obviously, folks in the Northeast Kingdom are a little more close to it than we are down here. So yeah, they're very familiar with that.
Now you mentioned that the grandparent scam still comes up in the picture. Are you seeing any other sort of common events that are taking place?
There's a couple of things, and one isn't necessarily a scam, but it's a situation where people are being asked to make an investment into a product, and they're not being provided full disclosure on what it is that they're investing in. And where we see that is with some of the free lunch or dinner seminars, not the ones that the AARP does. Those are fine. But there are some that are offered by individuals who don't have a securities registration. They may have a life insurance license only. So they can sell insurance products, but they can't make any recommendations or handle investment products. And the problem that we have is that they'll have these free lunch or dinner seminars and talk about a particular product. Normally it's what's called an equity indexed annuity, which is an insurance product. The way they're proposing funding it, though, is by making a recommendation to somebody who comes in and sits down and meets with them after they attend the seminar. And they look at their investment statements, and the insurance person is making a recommendation to liquidate that and use the proceeds to fund the insurance product. That's where they run afoul of the securities division, because if you're going to make a recommendation and provide advice, you need to be properly registered, and they're not. Oftentimes, the annuity contracts aren't fully disclosed to the folks before they get involved in them. There are surrender charges that they would need to be aware of if they terminate the contract early. There are other things that relates to how much they can earn in the contract. Things like capitalization rate, like how much can they participate in. So there's a participation rate and a cap rate that they need to be aware of, and sometimes those things aren't covered fully, and folks need to know about that.
And quite often, I'm guessing these tend to turn into high-pressure sales pitches?
Potentially. Yeah, potentially they do. And in Vermont, it's interesting. I mentioned that we have the 4 divisions. Well, we tend to work quite closely with our insurance division, oftentimes, especially on these kind of situations, because really they're touching on both regulators. Sometimes there's an issue with the way the insurance product itself, the equity index annuity, is being sold. So there may be some sales practice issues that our insurance folks would look at. Another area that is popular with not just Vermonters, but people throughout the country, are variable annuities. And a variable annuity is actually regulated by both of us, because a variable annuity in Vermont is deemed to be a security, because there are those sub-accounts, and some people call them mutual funds, but it's not really a mutual fund when it's packaged in that annuity. So, if you're going to offer that to a client, you have to be registered as either a broker-dealer agent or an investment advisor. So you need to have the securities license, but that's a product that we're both involved in the regulation of. So it's a little different.
And I would imagine that, a lot of people who become victims of this kind of sales pitch are working under a sense of reciprocity, that, you gave me a meal, or you gave me a toaster, whatever the gift prize is for the day, and as a result, I owe you as the vendor something in return?
Right. That's actually one of the persuasion tactics, as you're familiar with, that scammers use, and reciprocity is exactly what it is. Where most of us were raised as kids that if somebody does something nice for you, you do something nice back. And that's how a lot of these work, because the thought is, I'm giving you this meal. And the interesting thing is, I live in Chittenden County, and I get some of these at my house. I guess they don't look at the list before they send them out. But they send them to me, and some of the restaurants that they hold these are pretty high end, so I'm kind of surprised. So 2 things. I mean, one, if you're going to have a free lunch or dinner seminar and you're going to hold it at a place like one of these restaurants, that you're not going to go in there for dinner for less than $50 a person, how much money must they be making on the transaction? But you're right, people will attend and they'll almost feel obligated to sign up for a second appointment, or however it is that they're using these. Now, I want a caveat here. They're not all fraudulent. There are some of these that are done the right way, and we're familiar with them. What I would caution folks is just, don't feel like if you attend, don't feel like you have to then get involved. These are supposed to be informational only, and they're not supposed to be salesy or high pressure. And I would also throw out there that if any of your folks viewing this program get one of those kind of invitations, and it looks like it's investment related, if they call the division and speak with us, we then can look into it a little bit more and make sure that if it's a firm, if it's a broker-dealer firm or something that's involved, that they're aware that this is being offered, and that everything is on the up and up, and that they don't need to worry about that before they attend.
That kind of leads into the next question, which is, if I'm out there looking for something to invest in, I've got an insurance plan that just came through, or a rich uncle that passed away and left me with some money to invest. What can I turn to for not necessarily help, because there are brokers who do that, but to at least know that my investment opportunity is really legit?
Okay. Oh, there's a couple of things that you can do, and that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up, because most folks aren't aware that there are some things that they could do initially, kind of their own due diligence before they ever get involved. So it's actually twofold. One, they need to find out about the person that they're doing business with. And oftentimes we hear, oh, well, I've known them for forever. They've been around, or we're familiar with them. And maybe this is just my, kind of my Jersey cynicism showing up here, but when it comes to money, you really don't know anybody. And you need to do some background, and we call it investigate before you invest. And what does that mean? It means that you should look up the background of the individual that you're doing business with, and if they are a broker-dealer agent or an investment advisor, they have to have certain registration qualification examinations that they've taken. And if you contact the division, we can go through that with you. If you could tell us who the person is and who they work for, we can look them up in what's called the Central Registration Depository System, or CRD. We're big on acronyms. People can also do that themselves through FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. They can look at the FINRA broker check, and they can look into the background of the individual that they're dealing with. And some folks are saying, well, I don't need to do that because I know them, and what kind of information are you going to be able to give me anyway? Well, here's some of the things that we could tell them if we look somebody up. We can let them know how long the individual's been in the business, which registration examinations they've taken and successfully completed, how long they've been in the industry, how long they've been with their firm, how many firms they've been with, so that they hop around every couple of years, and whether or not they have had any disciplinary history or customer complaints. That's really good information to somebody, for somebody to have before they make a decision as to who they want to entrust their money to. The second part of that you mentioned was the investment itself. We can assist there as well. There's the SEC has a database called the EDGAR database. So individuals can look that up themselves. They can go to sec.org and look it up, and once you get on there, there's a link for the EDGAR database. They can put in the ticker symbol. If it's a stock or a mutual fund, they could put that in, and they can look it up, and it'll give them all the financials on that entity, so they could do some due diligence that way. Again, we try to make it easy for folks, so they can call us. We'd be more than happy to look through that for you and help you out. And people have called and said, well, I looked at EDGAR like you told me to, but I didn't see this investment on there. And that's great. We two things. One, they did what we asked them to do, and secondly, they're reaching back out to us, so it's great. Not everything will be on there. There may be some private placements that may not show there. There may be some exempt offerings that are available that won't show on EDGAR. So if you contact us, we can help you understand whether or not what you're looking at is a legitimate security, or whether it may be potentially a scam or fraud. So
let's say I go to one of these great seminars, have the excellent lunch, and make that appointment with a person who's a broker, and let's assume it's on the up and up. This is a legit person. It's somebody who's offering something that is a legal offering in the state of Vermont. And I sit down and I say, boy, this sounds pretty good. I sign on the line. And then the next day, after I've given it some thought and I say, is there any protection for me to get out of that agreement?
So the short answer is it depends. And what I mean by that is it depends on the investment vehicle. So for example, if you were purchasing shares of stock and you entered your order today and tomorrow you decided that you really didn't want to go through with it, you can contact the broker. You may or may not be able to get out of it. Now, if you're already in it, you can always sell it because it's very liquid. You may, depending upon what has happened with that particular equity, you may have made a little money or it may cost you a little bit of money to get out of it, but you could always do that. Some of the products that are a little more sophisticated, I'll say, and have more moving parts, like a variable annuity, for example, or one of these equity indexed annuities that we were speaking about. Because they're insurance products, they have what's called a free look period. And normally that's 10 days. So if you entered into that contract today, and most folks, when you go to these seminars, it's a very emotional type of scenario. They're telling you about how you'll never lose money with this product, how it's the best thing for you, yada yada yada, and they get you very emotional, and you tend to make a decision based on emotion. And my wife will tell you that most men make decisions based on emotion and attempt to back it up 3 days later with logic, and not often, but sometimes. So in the case that you're mentioning, if you did that with an equity index annuity or with a variable annuity, you don't even have to worry about doing it the next day. I mean, once you get the contract, once you receive the contract, we always recommend that people go through it and understand it. And if there's something at that point that you don't feel comfortable with, really for whatever reason, you have 10 days to essentially put that contract back, contact the firm, send it back, and then you will receive your money back from the carrier.
Okay, so that's basically, as you know, one of the recommendations that we have in Fraud Watch, which is don't make decisions when you're in a highly charged emotional state.
Sure, absolutely.
So.
And because oftentimes, scammers, as you're well aware, scammers, that's their whole pitch, is just to get you emotionally involved, because when you make decisions that way, you tend not to make decisions as well as you would when you're thinking logically. And where had you been logical about it and looked at it that way, you'd have never been involved. So yeah, there are some products that offer some protections for folks. But one of the things that I attempt to stress over and over is, people really need to take the time to understand what it is that they're putting their money into. A lot of people come up to me at the seminars that, even that we do together, and they say, well, Bill, where should I put my money? What should I invest in? And I tell them, don't invest in anything that you don't understand. And that's something I tell everybody. If you don't understand it, don't put your money in it, because there's going to come a point in time where you have a question about how you're going to make a return or what are my options, and you're not going to know, and you're going to have to rely on somebody else to provide the information. So if you don't understand it, either A, don't do it, or B, learn about it first, feel comfortable with it before you ever put your money into it, because a lot of times it's tough to get out of it once you're in it.
And actually, that's the philosophy that Warren Buffett has when he invests, or Peter Lynch, who used to have the global fund.
Yeah, the Fidelity fund. Sure. And it's just really good advice. Oftentimes, I mentioned earlier that we have an aspect of the division where, if somebody complains, we look into the complaint. And part of that is, we bring folks in to talk to them about it, talk to them about why they sold this product to this individual. We're kind of going through the complaint and trying to find out more about what happened. And there are times where I'll ask somebody who has sold the product, help me understand how this works. Tell me what you said to your client when you sold it. And you can hear crickets, because oftentimes folks selling these products don't necessarily know what it is they're selling. They just know that the compensation is pretty good. Does it mean that they're doing this, egregiously? Not necessarily. But one of the things that you can do is if somebody, a financial professional, is showing you a product and asking you to put your money into it, ask them to explain how it works. And try to make sure that they understand what it is that they're selling you so that you will better understand what it is that you're attempting to put your money in and doesn't make sense for you.
So we've mentioned a few things that people can do to educate themselves. You've mentioned FINRA and also your department, obviously.
Yes.
Securities and Exchange Commission?
SEC has some good educational materials on their website. So if you go to sec.gov, there'll be some good information there. They actually have an investor education division that handles a lot of the same kind of things that we do. They just do it on a national level. So the SEC is a good spot. FINRA is a good place, finra.org. There's a lot of good educational information there. We have some things on our website. There's really no shortage of information out there for folks to to look at. It just it's not the most, in many cases it's not the most interesting reading in the world, but it's important that you take the time to look at it and understand and help kind of help educate yourself and find out if the options that you're looking at currently, or maybe things you already have, maybe they don't really meet your needs the way they should be. So by educating yourself a little bit, you might be able to help yourself.
And I would imagine that investment firms that do due diligence would be upfront about issues too.
Yes, we're very fortunate in Vermont. The overwhelming majority of the financial professionals that we have are on the up and up. They do a good job. Are there times when people do things they shouldn't? Absolutely. But for the most part, if you contact one of the firms here that you may be dealing with or maybe you're thinking about utilizing, they're more than happy to answer those kind of questions for you, and that's really what they're there for. So yeah, that's a good resource as well.
Well, we've had a long conversation today.
Yeah, we have.
Maybe longer than we should have, but any last comments that you want to make about either the department or about this whole topic of investment?
Well, the department is here to help protect Vermonters. Our mission is twofold. One, it's to protect Vermont investors, and then on the flip side of that is to create an efficient capital market for small businesses as a way to raise capital. I'm very fortunate to have the group that we have working at the division. We've got some great folks as a department. We've got a lot of great people that are here to help folks, and that's what we do. We go out and do a lot of outreach, as you're familiar with, both on the banking side, insurance side, securities. We go out together. We work with you and AARP. So we're here to educate folks, and I guess what I would part with is we are here. We're a resource. Utilize us. We would rather be proactive with you than reactive. And if you let us know things ahead of time, we might be able to help you from becoming a victim of fraud. And that's, I think, what we'd all like.
Well, my guest today is Bill Carrigan, the Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Financial Regulation, and Bill's division is the Investment and Securities Division. I want to thank you, Bill, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll have some future opportunities to share information and speak to the public.
We look forward to that. Thank you.
When it comes to investing, where do you turn for information? Investor.gov is a free, easy-to-use website with objective information on investing wisely and avoiding fraud. Learn about financial products, research investment professionals, and find answers to your questions, all in plain language from a source you can trust. Investor.gov, created by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for investors like you.